Okay, I'm recording the meeting. I hope it's okay. It's for us. But try to put the mode of your view as for the speaker, so the speaker will be in the center. תנסו לשים את הדוברת במרכז, נכון? לארה מופיעה כדוברת. רגע. אוקיי. אז אנחנו עוברים עכשיו לאנגלית, ובבקשה תכתבו צ'אטים, משהו שדברים לא ברורים, ותהיו בקשר, וכל התהליך הזה של הגשת תלונות לאום, אנחנו רוצים להנגיש אותו גם בעברית, כי זאת לא נעשה, אז תהיו בקשר שנוכל להסביר, והרעיון הוא שאנחנו מחפשות כרגע את המעגל הראשון של נשים, כרגע רק נשים, בהמשך גברים, שביחד נעשה את הפיילוט ונגיש את התלונות לאום, לראות איך זה עובד. אוקיי, sorry Renata, hi. So here we are. This is the Tribunal for Gender Crimes. We are a grassroots organization, independent. We are not yet an NGO. And we are exploring alternative spaces for survivors and try to see how to fill the needs that victims and survivors we have regarding acknowledgement and accountability, especially when the criminal system, the local criminal system as in Israel, it's not really giving us answers, and it's very disappointing. So I know about this mechanism, and I never use it, and I don't know if any woman in Israel, she did it. So we wanted to hear from you and try to think maybe we want to make like a pilot, and we can present maybe a collective or individual complaints to the UN and try to see how maybe this can be to broaden the possibilities and to make another tracks for justice. So please, we are happy to have you and you can present yourself.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking to you, and I really appreciate these opportunities to get in touch with activists and thinking about ways to move forward together. So thank you for this invitation. My name is Renata Preturlan. I work at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I support the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. So I was talking to Jessica a bit about how to organize our conversation, and I'm going to make a brief presentation about what the Special Rapporteurs do and what kind of ways we can engage with you. Is everybody having trouble hearing me? I don't know if it's me or...
Yeah, okay, I put the volume. Maybe you can try to...
Yeah, maybe I'll try speaking up because I don't have an actual microphone, but if it's, let me know if it's better, any better? Yeah, can you hear me mostly? Okay.
Okay.
So yes, I'm going to do a brief presentation, but I look forward to engaging with you and we can have a very informal conversation. So basically, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, she's part of this system in the UN, which is called the Special Procedures. So the Human Rights Council has several independent human rights experts that are appointed by the council and that support the council in its activities. So these independent experts, they have different names. So Special Rapporteur is probably the most common one, but you also have independent experts, you have working groups, and for different issues and countries. So you have 44 thematic mandates and 11 country mandates. So we are working in just one of those 44 thematic issues. So there are many issues. And of course, many of the cases we work with, deal with different issues. So if you have a case of, let's say we worked a bit on obstetric violence, so that also refers to the right to health. And so there are many issues that are dealt with by different experts, but we always work together to have a full view of the situation and the possible violations. So the special procedures, they are a system. They have a set of rules and procedures that they all follow, and their main mission is to support states in improving their respect of human rights according to the human rights commitments that they have. So they do that in many ways. That can mean technical assistance, that can mean giving direct recommendations, that can mean doing thematic explorations, that can mean working on cases, doing advocacy and being vocal about issues. So there are many avenues, but the main purpose is to make sure that states will fulfill their human rights obligations. And this mandate in particular is actually one of the oldest mandates we have in special procedures. It was created in 1994 by the old Commission on Human Rights, which was the body that existed before the Human Rights Council. And it was created in a moment when thinking about violence against women and about women's rights was shifting at the international level, because violence against women was historically considered a private issue. So disputes between individuals, a private matter between couples, and if there is a government obligation to enforce criminal law, this would not mean an international human rights obligation, because the state agents, the state officials were not usually the ones who were perpetrating this kind of violence. And in the 90s, we have there's the CEDAW Convention, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is from the 70s. It unfortunately does not expressly mention violence, but it is the CEDAW committee, the treaty body that monitors the convention, has developed jurisprudence on the connection between discrimination and violence. And so this and other developments led to, in the 90s, this growing consensus that violence against women is a human rights violation. And states are obligated to, if they are not the direct perpetrators of the violence, they have what we call due diligence obligations. They have obligations to prevent acts of violence, to attempt to shift culture and values that reproduce stereotypes and patriarchal values that feed into violence against women, and also to punish and sanction perpetrators, to give remedies to victims. So all of these obligations, we call them due diligence obligations. And that means that if a government is systematically failing victims and survivors, then those states are incurring human rights violations. And so if we're thinking that violence against women is a human rights violation, then the international system can set up a framework to deal with those cases and to assist states in improving their response to violence against women. So the Special Rapporteur and other mandates, we call them mandates, each of the thematic areas and countries that are dealt in the special procedures. They have three main tools at their disposal. So the first tool is country visits. The Special Rapporteur, she can be invited, or she can ask for an invitation, and she can be invited to go to any member state of the UN and to visit on site, to have meetings with government officials, with NGOs, with activists, to visit places of interest, and to speak to parties concerned, to assess the situation of violence against women in the country and make recommendations. So this current Special Rapporteur, her name is Dubravka Shimonovich, and she's from Croatia. She has been to Israel in 2016, and she issued a report with recommendations. So I would suggest, if you were interested, you could check the report. It covers a wide range of issues that relate to violence against women. So that's one modality. Of course, because of COVID, we haven't had country visits in a little while, but we do hope that slowly we can re-begin with some of the visits, and let's see for the next few months if it will be possible. The other tool that we have, the special rapporteurs have, are thematic reports. So the special rapporteur, every year she presents to the Human Rights Council a summary of everything that she has been working on, and she will provide in a thematic report a study of a thematic issue relevant to that mandate, to give general recommendations that are of interest to the whole world. So it's a very broad range, of course, because we are always trying to consider different contexts and situation in different regions, but always with a thematic focus. And so this current rapporteur, she has had a few thematic priorities that she has been working on. So one of them, an important one, is femicide, or gender-related killings of women. This is something that she had a report for the General Assembly on this. So she has 2 reports per year, one to the Human Rights Council, another to the General Assembly. So she had one on femicide. She has also worked in new manifestations of violence against women. So she has a report on online violence against women. She has other reports focus on issues that are not new, but maybe more invisible, like obstetric violence, violence against women in politics. She also, she had one on COVID last year, specifically on the risks of the increased risk of violence against women in the context of COVID and all of the restrictive measures. And she also did one that was presented last week, actually. We are just out of this busy season here in the council, where she presented on the issue of rape. And it focuses specifically on rape, but it has many of the recommendations and analysis are applicable to other forms of sexual violence as well. And this one, I think it could be of particular interest to you from what Jessica shared about the group. She goes through a review of international law, and not only international human rights law, but also international criminal law and humanitarian law, to see how rape has been understood and defined and criminalized in those different frameworks, and what kind of minimum requirements we get from international law that states should have in their legislations when it comes to how rape is criminalized and then prosecuted. So she goes, it's a very, very analytical report. So she goes through every aspect of legislation, how rape is defined. Is it defined by the use of force or by lack of consent? And lack of consent is the international standard. So also, who can be a victim of rape? We know that in many countries, only women can be victims, and only certain forms of penetration are considered rape, others are not. So she also goes through the need for legislation that includes all persons, and that is inclusive of different types of violations. She also talks about marital rape, which in many countries is still not criminalized as an exception to legislation on rape, and making clear that no matter the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator, as any type of sexual relation that is not consented is rape. That's the definition, and it should apply to any type of relationship. And she also goes into some specifics about how rape is prosecuted. And so the idea that statutes of limitation are a serious issue for a majority of victims of sexual violence, because it usually takes longer for victims of that type of crime to be able to come forward. And in some countries, we did a review of 105 countries and compared legislation. And we found some very troubling situations that, for instance, in some countries, the statute of limitation is 3 months, 1 year. So that basically it precludes victims from coming forward. So she recommends that there should be no statutes of limitation for this type of crime. Also, the issue of standards of proof in some countries, since rape is defined as an act by force or threat, then victims are expected to be able to provide physical evidence that might not be there, because rape is does not necessarily leave that type of physical evidence. And so she discusses the issue of evidence as well. And her main point, and there are other issues so statutes of limitation for children victims as well. So the main argument of the report is that it's not enough to have reforms in legislation, for instance, that correctly change the definition to be based on consent, if you do not fix these other types of provisions in legislation that prevent victims from being able to come forward and from having any chance that the legal system will actually take their cases seriously and prosecute the perpetrators. And so this is the main argument. It is not a report on the prevention of rape in terms of cultural changes that are necessary, because this is a different discussion, and it's necessary, but it's not possible to do it in 19 pages. These reports are very short because we have a word limit. So it does focus on legislation, but on things that if those things were reformed in different countries throughout the world that still are very distant from these standards, victims would have a better shot. It doesn't mean that everything would be fixed, but victims would have a better shot that their cases would be taken seriously, and that there would be less what we call attrition rates, because what happens is that the number of cases that are reported are just a fraction of the actual cases that happen. And then we know that once the case is reported, only a fraction of those will lead to any type of police procedure or investigation, and only a fraction of those will lead to a prosecution, and only a fraction of those will lead to a conviction. And so when you go through those fractions, we have very, very low conviction rates for rape worldwide. So in some countries it's under 1%, and we have seen in many countries recently the issue of sexual violence has become more visible in the past few years, and especially because of grassroots movements that have been protesting in many parts of the world. And the response in many cases by governments has been to increase punishment. And that's a very weak response, because if nobody's getting prosecuted, that changing punishment doesn't change anything. So the theoretical punishment doesn't mean, and that's not, as I'm sure you've also discussed, and that's not also a sufficient response to victims. So we had recent changes in legislation in countries, I believe in Bangladesh, in Nigeria, where death sentence was included as a penalty for rape. And this is against human rights standards, and it's not something that will fix the issue that the legislation is problematic in all of these other ways that we are talking about how rape is defined. So many victims are not included in the legal response. So I think this is something that could interest you, and I'm happy to talk more about this. But just to go then to the final, to the third tool that the special procedures have, which is the communications procedure. So, and this is probably what's more relevant to you to engage with the special rapporteur. The communications are a mechanism to, they are letters in practice that we send to governments about human rights violations that we are informed of. So if the special rapporteur receives information that there is an ongoing violation of human rights that are related to her mandate, she can prepare a summary of those allegations, and we do some work to assess these allegations. Only So there is some investigation also that happens. Of course, we're not a judicial mechanism, so it is not, we're not trying to establish, we're not trying to prove allegations, we just do some minimal corroboration. And then we can send this information to government saying that we have strong reason to believe that there is a human rights violation happening here. And if this is true, and if we are writing, we usually know it is. If this is true, then this would be a violation of all of these international obligations that your government has in light of these conventions and other instruments that we have that establish these obligations. So basically, these letters, the communications, they can deal with past violations. They can be about an ongoing situation that needs urgent redress, or a situation that needs an urgent response to prevent further violations. Or it can refer to possible changes in policy or legislation that would have a human rights impact. So those are the three main types. And that's where, well, so just to summarize, how we engage with civil society, with activists in all of this. So when we're doing country visits, obviously civil society is just so important, because that's how we can get information about the situation on the ground. And so we usually have a lot of dialogues before we go to a country, during the visit as well, and to prepare the country visit report. But that's not really in our expectations for the near future because of COVID, and also because we had a fairly recent visit to Israel. So I don't expect another visit very soon. But for thematic reports, we usually publish calls for submissions. And so this means that we will publish a list of questions, of issues that we are trying to explore with that report. And organizations from any part of the world are invited to send their inputs, to send their information about the situation where they are, or also just making broad comments about those issues and share information. So that's one also key way to enrich the work that we do. And in this report on rape, we really relied on the submissions we received to have that much information about so many countries. But the communications are probably the more dynamic way we have of and also to work on a specific case, because with thematic reports and with country reports, we do broad overviews of those issues. But with communications, we deal with cases. So that can be one individual person, that can be a group of people that have similar situations or circumstances. That can be the whole country too, but it depends on the topic and how we're doing it. But usually we're dealing with individual or collective cases that can be that can be identified. And because what is the objective of a communication? So we send this letter to the government. We say we have received information about these things, and we are very concerned that this could amount to a human rights violation. Your obligations are these, and then we send questions about how the government is planning to respond based on human rights to that situation. That sort of guides us. It's the questions are actually kind of guides saying, this is what we expect from you. What are you doing to actually do this and take these measures that are needed? And then what we expect is that the government will receive that information and address that situation and inform us of the measures that were taken to address it. So this is a tool for engaging in dialogue with the government so that the government can take measures. We can't force governments to take measures because that's not the nature of this mechanism. But what we hope with this is that not only we can provide sufficient advice to the government about what is wrong and how it is wrong, but also we can generate public attention to these issues, because those communications are made public, and then this can be used in advocacy in different ways. So I think this is the main points I wanted to bring to you. maybe if I can just share my screen for a sec. Oh, sorry, I think it's been disabled. But let me just put here in the chat box then. This is the main page of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. And here I'm also sharing this link, which has an explanation on the communications procedure. So it's a summary of basically more information about what I just explained about how this works, and also links if you want to submit a complaint. You can also do it through this second link that I sent.
Renata, do you want to share screen?
Yeah, if I can just quickly, I can just show you where to find it. I think it could be helpful.
Okay, I think you can do it now.
Okay, yes. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, here I just wanted to show you very quickly. This is the mandates webpage in the website of OHCHR. So you can find here about more information about the mandate. This is our current special rapporteur, and also information about all of the reports. We have different statements that come out here. Our calls for inputs get published here. And if you go here at the top, submitting complaints, then you get to that other link I sent, which explains about the communications and the criteria and so on. So yeah, some of the questions you have, sorry, some of the questions you might have, they are discussed here. So any person can submit information. You don't need to be an NGO. You can be just an individual. You don't need to have a lawyer. Any person can share information and a complaint with us. And there's also some explanation about consent, confidentiality that I can explain to you if you would like to know more about that. And just before we go to maybe some questions and a more open debate, I just wanted to mention that the current special rapporteur, she's finishing her tenure now in July. So July 31st is her last day. And we are in the middle of a process of selecting a new special rapporteur. The Human Rights Council has already published the list of 3, the pre-selected candidates, and this should be confirmed in this month. So we will have a new rapporteur. And that means that it is not easy at this moment to know which will be the priorities of this new mandate holder, what topics she will, I believe it's a she, we have 3 women. We've never had a man in this role, but what are the main issues that she will prioritize? And but of course there are some issues that I personally believe that any rapporteur would prioritize. So the issue of femicide, of sexual violence, those are issues that are very central to the mandate's work even before this mandate holder. So I wouldn't expect much difference there, but of course there can be some changes in terms of focus and because they do have a certain degree of autonomy to decide how they wish to work and also which cases to prioritize and so on. So maybe I can stop here and I can listen to if you have any questions or comments. Happy to.
Yeah, just checking that you stay in the position.
Yes, I'll be here. So yeah. I can give you my email. I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be here. But the special rapporteur is changing. So
okay, so we have a contact where and maybe I just start with a quick question. Do you have a successful story of through individual complaints that you approach the state and something good happened, a change happened?
So we have there is I mean because with violence against women, what's the good result, right? There's already so much damage that was inflicted. But of course, I mean, there are better and worse responses. And We had a communication that was issued to Argentina. I think it was in January this year, or maybe December, about a femicide case. It was Paola, I forgot her last name. Yeah, so this was a very shocking case of femicide. It was an English teacher who was killed by a former student who was stalking her, and she had filed complaints several times. So she made, I think it was 11 complaints to the police. She had restraining orders, and then he didn't abide by those restraining orders, and she would inform the police, and they archived her complaints several times. And in the end, it led to this tragic outcome, and he killed her. And so we had a communication on that. Of course, the tragedy is already happened, but the government did provide support to her family. They included her family in this new program that they were creating to support the family of victims of femicide, and they have reordered. They have ordered investigations about the role that the prosecutor and the judge played in filing, in archiving the complaints that she had made. And they are apparently trying to hold people accountable. These processes haven't ended yet. They are still happening. But there seems to be a positive interest in trying to give some answer in this case. We have in our webpage, we have a good stories. So we have a few examples of let me find one. I had one, I think it was the Bahamas that they changed. So we do have some examples, more commonly connected to country visits than communications, but there are some cases of communications that also have led to changes. But I mean, let's be completely transparent here. We do have also cases that have led to nothing, that we didn't receive a response of the government, and that happens sometimes. But I still believe that even in those cases, it can still have a positive impact, because I mean, the UN is just one part of a very complex web of actors that are trying to make things better. So of course that the special rapporteur, she can give visibility, she can give legitimacy to some issues, and even if the government doesn't respond to the special rapporteur, then sometimes that action is picked up by the local national human rights institution or by a group of activists, and this leads to more visibility. So it's all part of a chain, I feel sometimes, and so it can have a positive impact overall. We had, especially in cases of detention, now I'm remembering other cases. We had a case of women in Cambodia who were detained for very sexist reasons that had nothing to do with criminal behavior. It was just a very sexist application of the law. And we did this communication. There was a campaign also by human rights organizations there, and they were released. I mean, can we say the communication did it? I don't know. It was part of a large effort that we were part of. So we did this communication, we pushed the government, and then the government did respond, and there was embarrassment. So we're trying to generate this context of embarrassment. Sometimes it's not enough, but we are part of this puzzle.
שרון, יכול להיות שראיתי שאת רוצה לשאול שאלה?
Yeah, I would love to ask a question. Do you hear me well?
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, please. So my name is Dr. Sharon Khalifa-Guetta, and I'm an art historian, actually, but I do engage some gender and feminist issues. And I wanted to ask, and I'm sorry if you said something about it before, and I was a bit delayed to enter this conversation. are you investigating in any way or contemplating recommending some laws regarding the second cycle of domestic abuse, which means for this moment, only a woman can testify over her violence, and also you can file a police report only for physical violence in Israel anyway. Economic violence or any other type of violence is not acceptable. There is nothing in the law that support the second wave, the bigger round of the family to come and assist and, you know, have some legal right at all. Although there are a lot of researchers that prove that the women that are experiencing violence are not in the position to help themselves, are not independent persons that can be fully, completely be accepted as an independent person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my question, if you're working about that issue.
So let me just see if I understood correctly. You mean other people that witness this violence, that they should be allowed to make a complaint? Is that it?
Exactly.
Okay. Yes. So this is something that is actually has been addressed in many reports and many documents. And yes, I think that the strongest we have is the general recommendation number 35 of the CEDAW committee. So the treaty bodies, they have general recommendations. These are interpretations of the convention that they offer more detailed guidance about how to implement the convention on specific issues. And so the CEDAW committee had a general recommendation in 1992 on violence against women that consolidated this view that violence against women is part of it results from the structural discrimination that women face, and therefore violence is linked to discrimination, and therefore violence against women is covered by the convention. And so this is the path that we had to go to make sure that international law covered violence against women. And this general recommendation was updated in 2017. It was updated by GR 35, which condenses a lot of the developments that we had in those almost 30 years. And what GR 35 says is that violence against women should be prosecuted ex officio. What that means is that the prosecution should happen, it can't be wholly dependent upon the victim's complaint. So if the police or the prosecution is informed that there is a situation of violence, and this information may come from the victim themselves or by other family or friends or anybody else who is aware of the situation, they can report this, and then the prosecution should move forward. And the principle behind that is that violence against women is not a private matter. It's not something that concerns only the person who experiences it. It is something that affects society in general, and that's why it needs to be prosecuted. It can't be wholly dependent upon the victim's complaint, because it is a social good that we are protecting. We wish to preserve a society where there is no violence against women, and therefore it can't be just a private matter of decision if a person wishes to come forward with that situation or not. So there is international guidance on that. Not all states have legislation that is compliant with that, but this is very clearly set in international law.
I know there must be questions. I have a question from Ruhama. Ruhama, do you want to show where you are? Where you are? I can't see you, but you might see everyone. Ruhama, okay. את שומעת, רוחמה? Okay. I want to ask when she is here. רוחמה, את שומעת?
Okay. Natasha can בצ'אט.
Okay. So Ruhama was asking which kind of protection the mechanism, the special rapporteur, you can give to a woman who decides to present a complaint, either individually or collectively?
Yeah, that's a very important point. Unfortunately, we don't have the means to provide protection to people who engage with us, in the sense of we can't provide police escorts, we can't we don't have the means to do this. And so any decision to engage with this mechanism is something that should be reflected, because our first rule in this work is do no harm. So we never want to do anything that might endanger a source, that might endanger a person that shares information with us. So that's our first concern. The one way of protection is confidentiality. So what we can do is we never reveal our sources. So any information that is shared with us, no government will ever know where we got this information from. And we can ensure that the names of victims are not made public in our reports if they prefer this way. So this can be kept confidential, but the names, they are shared with the government. So they are privately, confidentially shared with the government. Why is that? Because the whole purpose of doing the communication is to make sure that the government can take measures to address a situation and fix it. So if we don't say who is having their rights violated, then the government will just respond, well, we can't do anything about it because you're not telling us where this happened, who it happened to, and what we need to do. So we do share the name of the victims with the government, but we can make this confidential to the broader public. So those are ways we offer a layer of protection, but of course, it goes only up to that point. And then if any individual person feels that they would be at risk of having the government know what happened to them, or if they feel that the information in any way they don't want it to be public, then this mechanism would not be suited for this case, unfortunately.
Ronit?
Hi. So my question is, I know that other special procedures sometimes engage in giving expert opinions and providing for an amicus curiae brief. Yeah. And I wondered, so because I haven't looked at your mandate, I was wondering whether the special rapporteur would be interested in taking such a position in cases brought in Israel to the highest appeal, maybe, and if you have any experience with that.
So this mandate holder, she hasn't been very active in amicus curiae. I know that other mandates have done this, and this is something that they can do. What usually happens is that the mandate holders, they select cases that are emblematic, that can be representative of broader situations, and that can also help consolidate international standards. So there is some filtering about which cases to involve with, and I honestly can't say if she would be interested in doing this or not, especially because we're changing rapporteurs. So I think it's a case-by-case decision. We will see with the new rapporteur if she would be interested in doing this type of expert opinion. But I feel that if there is something that you identify that could be relevant, just let us know, and we're happy to discuss it with the special rapporteur and to see how we could contribute. But I think it would be case by case in general.
Thank you. Ronit, maybe can you say just the question in Hebrew, because I'm not sure everyone is familiar with the term.
מה ששאלתי זה שלפעמים אפשר להביא תביעה כשהיא מגיעה לערכאה הכי גבוהה, וכחלק מהתביעה אפשר לבקש מה שנקרא או חוות דעת מומחים, או מה שנקרא חבר בית המשפט. ובגדול זה מאפשר לגוף חיצוני להביע דעה על התיק שדנים בו, ובסיטואציה הספציפית הזאת אני תוהה כמה משקל וכמה הם ירצו להיכנס לדבר כזה, כדי להגיד שבישראל יש חובה תחת המשפט הבינלאומי וזכויות אדם, לתת הגנה כלשהי שהיא לא סיפקה. אז לא יודעת אם זה היה ברור.
כן, כן, אז היא ענתה שזה לא ממש קרה, אבל שאם יש משהו שאפשר לנסות לעניין את הרפורטרית החדשה.
כן, כלומר היא אמרה שאם יהיו תיקים ספציפיים שיכולים להביא לאיזשהו שינוי משמעותי, שיש איזשהו דיון מהותי סביבו, אז אולי זה משהו שהיא תוכל לקדם.
Okay, we have a question from Corinne. Corinne. At mute.
Hi, can
Can
you hear
you
me?
introduce yourself?
Hi, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Hi, my name is Corinne Cadusi. I'm an active mom, and I'm actually, like, for the last 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years, I represent many moms, mothers who is suffering after they decided to get divorced, and then they start all the divorce process, abusing divorce process. If they decided to leave the abusing husband, so now they're starting with all the divorce process, but all the people, all the judges, the policemen, social workers, everything is closing up on them. It's like a continuing abusing and violence in the law, and there are many women like that who live daily hell lives like that, and we are trying to change the law, to change actually to change everything, because it's not only not working here, it's hurting people's life. And there are many cases, children was taken from their moms, and they gave them to pedophile fathers, violent fathers. There are all kinds of violence, technology, economy, everything that you can imagine on yourself, and it continues years. Like there are cases which are exactly what it. I heard the other question. It continues like very important cases that can be changed. The problem is, or actually what I'm looking for those women is to find a way with you to change all the game that's going on here inside Israel, and there is no help inside of Israel for those women. The judges, everything, every person. So I ask if which kind of help do you have for those women? How can we connect? How can we continue to sue and to change for the best it's general. I asked general, but we can talk. We have to talk about it, and it has to be.
Okay, it's a complicated issue. Maybe if you can refer, if I'm thinking from another countries, women make complaints to the rapporteur related to divorce and children and all this situation. In Israel, sometimes it's more complicated because generally it's connected to the religious court. The religious court decides on marriage and divorce. Okay.
Yeah.
רגע, קורין, בואי ניתן כי יש עוד הרבה נשים ואין הרבה זמן. Yes, Renata.
If you want to continue, I don't know if you have but I think I understood the general point you made, and this is unfortunately something that we see in many countries. The different issues regarding domestic violence and then custody issues. So how domestic violence is considered or not as in divorce proceedings, how it is considered or not when deciding on custody arrangements. And so there are several risks for women, even if they manage to get a divorce and they maintain custody of the children. Sometimes the abusive father, they have visitation rights, and then this mother has to be exposed to that abuser and has contact with them. And so it is a very troubling case. And in some cases, women who have lost custody of their children because they denounced the abuse and they were not believed by the courts. So we do have different types of situations connected to domestic violence and how divorce and custody plays out. The mandate has done quite a lot on that. We did several communications. I remember 2 recent ones on Spain on cases of child custody in which the issue of domestic violence was not considered by the court properly. She also had a statement. She coordinates this initiative of platform of independent mechanisms. So they issued a statement listing international standards on this. And we do have international instruments that talk about this. So the Istanbul Convention, which is the more complete instrument, it's regional, so it's only for Europe, but it's the more complete instrument there is now on violence against women. It has a specific article saying that any custody decisions should consider a prior history of violence, of domestic violence. And there is a CEDAW case. So the CEDAW committee can also review individual cases. Unfortunately, this is not something that would be helpful for you because Israel has not accepted this because it's an optional protocol to the convention. And so each country has to accept the communications procedure of the convention, and Israel has not accepted. So unfortunately, this is not available to you. But the CEDAW committee has it, but the standards, they are interpretations of the convention. So if you cannot present a case on Israel, but the standards that were developed in cases of other countries, they also apply to Israel because it's about how the committee is interpreting the convention. So there was this case in Spain about a woman who, there was a history of domestic violence. She divorced the child's father, and the child killed the father killed the child during a visit. And so this was considered by the committee as a case where the courts failed to identify that history of abuse, of protecting this child, of protecting this woman as well, because she could also have been victimized in this context. And it condemned Spain, and there were a number of decisions by the committee. And recently, the interesting thing was the government of Spain was not implementing the decision by the CEDAW committee. So the woman went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that the government had to abide by what the CEDAW committee decided. So this is a very strong case on domestic violence. So I'm just telling you all of this to say this is a very important issue for us, and this is something that is very recurrent. Unfortunately, it happens. We have cases like this in many parts of the world. In terms of concrete action, the more since it's not a very flexible mechanism, as you see. So we have these three options, and always the communication is the one that we can use to respond to specific situations. So what I usually advise when I speak to civil society, to activists that are working on these cases is it's helpful to, if you see that there is a recurrent issue like this, to identify maybe a few cases that are emblematic, that are representative of this trend that is going on, of people who obviously would agree to be named in this type of communication. And then we can work on a very solid communication, showing that this is not an isolated case. Because of course we can present a single case, and every single case should be addressed in itself. But when we are able to show a trend, when we have
exactly.
a case,
it's like to show that it's a system.
Yeah, exactly. When we show that the system as a whole is not that just one judge failed or one prosecutor failed, but the system isn't responding as it should, and the doors are being closed, and all of these services are not providing support as they should, then we have a much stronger case, and that increases, I think, the strength of the communication. So this is something I would advise you to think about, to consider. Of course, I cannot speak on behalf of the current rapporteur, nor of the next one, whoever she will be. So of course I cannot tell you that it's for certain that we would go ahead with this communication, but it's something that we could explore. So and it doesn't have to, you don't have to have all of the information, you don't have to do all the work and then come to us. You can, this can be a dialogue. So you can write to us saying, we are working on this. We think we might have a few women that could be interested in participating, and then I can check with the rapporteur, and if we have the green light, then you guys can do the extra work and gather more information. So this is something we can be very informal in that sense. It doesn't have to be like you need this whole petition all prepared to come speak to us. We can also discuss what's the best way to move forward. Is this a good case? Is this not a good case? So it can be we are very open to helping to come up with what's the best strategy as well.
Yeah, thank you. Rega, Corinne, this is a good opportunity to say that we at the Tribunal, we have translated the form that you have in your website.
Oh, great.
So we have it in Hebrew, and I suggest, Corinne, I have been a little bit learning about this issue through EINAT, and I participated in one of the conferences in the last year, that we make a special meeting with the form and with the procedure, and we can try to work with some women of the Tribunal on this issue of divorce and custody, and be in contact with Renata, okay? But I would like to go to the other questions, okay? So Corinne, be in touch with me. This is my email and telephone I put in the chat, and we can make, because this is a very urgent issue.
I wrote the number, and we will talk. It's a process, but it has to get started. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Renata.
Maya, רק שנייה, עוד מעט אני אתן לך. There is a question that was written to me. Let's see if I can phrase it. I don't know if this is the right expression. People that are in a cult, when people are like enslaved in a cult, this is the right sect. What is the name that you use in?
It's not a legal concept, so you can describe it any way you.
Yeah, like una secta religiosa.
Sí, entiendo.
Okay. So there are some cases that we know, and people that are in the Tribunal know about leaders, like the religious leaders of a cult, that they succeed to escape, let's say, from Israel, and they continue or they open the same group in, there is one in Guatemala, there is in the US, and some of the Israeli citizens go after him, and the abuse continues, and we are talking about gender crimes that are involved. If you have any experience about this, how the UN as an international mechanism can help when, you know, the person is Israeli, let's say it's in the US, and it's violating human rights in another country. So what can be done?
Yeah, this is actually one thing that is discussed in the report on rape that I just mentioned. And we were particularly thinking about the context of UN peace missions. So there is a recurrent problem of sexual abuse and sexual violence with UN peacekeeping and peace operations. And many of these crimes, they are never, they are not, they don't see justice, because what happens is that this usually a soldier or a military officer, they are serving under the UN flag on behalf of their country in another country, and so there are loopholes in legislation that allow these persons not to be prosecuted, because they would have to be prosecuted in their native country, but most native countries don't prosecute them afterwards. And so so in the report there is a recommendation that states should allow for extraterritorial jurisdiction to prosecute cases that involves their nationals, but that happened elsewhere. We were mostly thinking about the context of UN missions, but this also applies to other issues. It's not only for UN missions. So this is a recommendation that's already out there and general, so it would apply to this case as you mentioned. But of course, if we were to do like a communication on a case like this, what we would probably do is that we would issue a communication that is both to the country where this person moved to and to their country of origin, because they both have responsibilities to respond to that situation. So yes, this is, but of course this is very complicated, and it's not something that that most countries will accept readily. It's something that is, and it's also a good reason to work on communications, because it's also a way of pushing, you know, this type of issues.
Yeah, okay. As you see, we have very challenging issues, and we will give a lot of work to the new rapporteur. מאיה, איפה את? כן, את תגידי שתי מילים על עצמך, או...
Yes, hi. So my name is Maya, and I'm a member of the Israeli movement for freedom of choice at childbirth. And I wanted to say just a huge thank you. I remembered your name from email exchanges. We responded to the call for submissions about obstetric violence. So that was very, very, very momentous event for us. And it was, and I, you know, we wrote on a professional tone, but I wanted to say personally for me that that was a huge step in my healing process. So
thank you so much for sending the submission, because and I don't just say this, it's the absolute truth. Without the submissions, there wouldn't be the special rapporteur's work. All of these reports, they rely almost entirely on the submissions. So if we don't have, you know, active groups that are interested and involved and sending us information, then none of this happens. So thank you so much.
Could I ask? I don't know if we have time, but I am curious to know how she decided to put so much focus on this. Were there, and I know that the WHO, that there was a statement regarding mistreatment and abuse, and by this time the term that was used was obstetric violence, and I just wondered how that transition was made.
Yeah, I think it was I think she kind of catalyzed things that were already happening. So in many countries, the term had become more common. There were many movements and groups that were advocating for the use of the term obstetric violence. And I think it's the same with femicide. I think femicide, it started most in Latin America, and then some countries actually put it into legislation, but it wasn't a really like household name. And now it has really become more accepted, and it's become more used. So I think that she was also aware of this debates and discussions that were happening around obstetric violence, and she was persuaded that this is not just a health issue, that this is about human rights, this is about violence against women, and this is a form of violence. And because the definition of violence against women that we use is in the UN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it includes violence that is directed at women because they are women, or that affects women disproportionately. And so this is obviously a type of violence that affects women disproportionately because they are the ones who are engaging in childbirth. So I think it's very, now it seems obvious, right? I'm sure it didn't seem at the time, but it is, and I think it's a contribution that she has made to bring more awareness. I think she has helped make the term obstetric violence more accepted and recognizable and easier to talk about as well. So yes.
I didn't understand. You are talking about obstetric violence, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know what is the issue about. Can you say once what was the issue?
So it's the long name would be mistreatment and violence during pregnancy and childbirth, and after childbirth as well. So it's the different practices involved related to childbirth and pregnancy that are abusive towards women. So that includes like episiotomy, which are unnecessary cutting of women. Some practices like stitching. I'm sure Maya can explain better than me, but and also psychological violence that many women experience during childbirth. So it's very common in many countries that women they are harassed as they are experiencing pain, and they say, "Oh, you had fun doing it, now suffer it." So that type of violence, also not getting consent for medical procedures during childbirth, not respecting women's birth plans, and so there are many types of violations regarding consent, regarding sexual integrity, bodily autonomy that are involved in this phase of life. And so yeah, the report focuses on these types of violence. Sorry, you're muted.
I think this will be the last question, so we can finish more or less on time. And please, our idea is to get together and to work on this procedure, on this form in Hebrew, and think together and being, the pilot, and to do something innovative. So please be in touch, and we will continue with this. Constanza?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much. It has been like very interesting. I'm from Argentina, actually. I'm working with Jessica right now. And as you mentioned, a successful case in Argentina a while ago, I was thinking about this. I think the rate of femicide in Argentina, it's around every 23 hours, a woman is killed by the fact of being woman. And you mentioned also that cessation and punishment were not sufficient as response for part of the government. So my question was is there a way of enforce the fact that the victim should be at the center of the process? And also, because this is very frustrating, and I know things are changing and like people is more aware of what is happening right now, but is there a way of being ahead of these like events to stop happening and to work more over prevention that when the damage is already in place? Thank you.
Yeah, I think this, especially when we're talking about femicide, I mean, of course, we if we're not talking about prevention, then it's all pointless, right? I mean, it's the more tragic outcome, and we definitely want to ensure that there are ways of addressing it before it happens, because in most cases, especially when it's intimate partner violence that led to femicide, or if it's someone the victim knew, in most cases there were warnings. There was a situation of an escalation of violence that culminated in femicide. It very rarely is an isolated act that could not be foreseen. And in this case that I mentioned, it was obviously a tragedy that was announced. So she complained, she made reports, she did all she could for 5 years. And the response was not sufficient. Femicide has been a priority for the Special Rapporteur. She had a report in 2016 about this, and her last report to the General Assembly will also be on femicide. We just finished writing that report because she has this initiative, which is called the Femicide Watch Initiative. She has been advocating in all countries that she goes to that they should create these watch bodies. So the role of these watch bodies would be these observatories, or whatever you want to call them. They would be responsible for gathering information, data on femicide, number one, because many countries don't have information. They don't know how many women are killed by their intimate partners. They just lump everything. There are some countries that don't even disaggregate homicide by sex of the victim. So you don't even know like how many women are being killed. So it's that level of lack of knowledge. So we need to know what's going on. We need to monitor the situation. But the second part of the work would be to conduct analysis of cases. So the idea is that these groups would review what went wrong. What went wrong in this case? This victim went to the police X number of times. What did the police do? What did this other response service do? Did they do nothing? Did they report it? Did they follow up? Was this complaint archived without investigation? And so to identify those failings and to make recommendations to fix them. So that would be the idea. We need to start learning from all of these terrible deaths and not just let them continue to happen. And so the first report was about proposing these observatories, and the second report is about taking stock and evaluating what was done. So it was 5 years later. We do have some progress that was made. Of course, it is still not to the level that of fixing the problem, evidently, but there is some progress, and we do share some good practices to inspire other countries to follow good examples. And Argentina is a country that, although has a lot of femicides, there has also been quite some improvement in the past few years. So they do have a very good registry on femicides that follows a very rigorous methodology. So there is data. There are many institutions that are working on it. So the justice system has their monitoring. There are many NGOs that are very active on this. The government also has created their own observatory. So now what we want, okay, you have put all of this in place. Now let's make them work. Let's make them produce more changes in policy and in legislation. Because if it doesn't lead to changes, and if it doesn't lead to, like you said, a victim-centered approach, then it's not gonna work. We need to make sure that complaints are taken seriously, that they are investigated, and that they're not minimized, because that's the problem. The situations are considered not serious, and that's what happened in the case of Paola, and then the violence escalates, and we know that this happens because we have sufficient information to know that this is how things play out. So I know we are running out of time. So just before I give my final words, I just wanted to, I saw there was a comment about parental alienation syndrome, and yes, and we do have a specific press release talking about exactly how this invented syndrome is being used, but it's not an actual syndrome. The WHO has also removed it from its books. So it is a discussion that we do as well. And I have also put here in the chat box the emails for the mandate and also my own direct email. So you can be in touch with me and we can discuss and share information and discuss possible communications and other type of strategies in the future.
Well, Renata, thank you so much. And this opens many, many possibilities of a little bit of hope. And we will be in touch with you, and we are happy you stay. And let us know when there is a new name of a special rapporteur, and we will be in touch. And תודה רבה לכולם, ותהיו בקשר שנעשה את המהפכה. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye
you.
everyone.
Bye, תודה רבה. רגע, עוד מישהו כתב, thank you to you. יופי, תודה.
תודה.
קונסטנצה, תפיקתה. היו בהתחלה 20. אדר. אדר.